The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Carson Wentz is in, Sam Howell and Brett Rippon are out.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast.
The news, of course, is that the Vikings have made some switches at the quarterback position. Their quarterback room is now J.J. McCarthy, Max Brosmer, and Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was a name floated back in like March. He never joined a team. So he now joins the Vikings for the lowest you can possibly pay him. I actually think the money between him and Sam Howell works out to exactly a wash because of like veteran credits and stuff you don't need to worry about. But as a corresponding thing, they've released Brett Rippon, which was expected after that third preseason game. Max Brosmer pretty handily outplayed him in what was very clearly a winner go, a mano-a-mano, one man and two men enter, one man leaves kind of situation. But they also traded Sam Howell to the Philadelphia Eagles. The fact that this comes with Carson Wentz, like corresponding, is kind of funny and ironic because of the last time quarterbacks got traded between the Vikings and Eagles and how much it also had to do with Carson Wentz. But I digress. The Sam Howell trade nets the Vikings a 5-6 swap and a 7th next year. So they're on the good end of the 5-6 swap and a 7th next year. Or 7th in 2027, not next year. So if you're keeping track at home, the Vikings got Sam Howell in the draft for a 5-5 swap. They swapped a 5th for a different 5th that was like 30 spots lower and got Sam Howell for it. And when they traded Sam Howell to the Eagles, they managed to take an entire 6th and turn it into the Eagles' 5th. Interesting little fairy dust moment where you can make a little extra value out of nothing for a player that played pretty poorly in camp and, played poorly in one of his 2 preseason games and ultimately didn't get the QB2 job. I wonder how long the Vikings had Carson Wentz in their minds, but also if they did not bringing him, he was sitting on the couch. He could have been there for camp, right? Even if you had 5 QBs for camp. I mean, shoot, the Browns had 6. Like, that's not crazy. And he could have been, spending camp with the Vikings, with the receivers, getting chemistry and becoming a better backup. But as it is, they probably thought that Howell was a preferable option to Wentz and that Wentz would be like a backup if Howell crashes out. Well, Howell totally flames, crashes, burns. And so they go with this. Some other news happened. We'll get into some cuts. And then I was just kind of trying to think through Carson Wentz as a backup quarterback. This is the only place you're going to get serious Carson Wentz analysis from me because it's Football Party or on the squad show where Arif is. I'm not there. I'm going to have bad intentions, but thinking through him and the way that his career has gone as a backup quarterback is interesting. And it's what he's done for the last 2 years. So it's not like we're, taking some big grand experiment, but I think it's worth talking out and sort of recounting Carson Wentz's NFL career and how it came to the point that it is right now from being, a 2017 MVP favorite and Super Bowl winner, and even in the couple years after that, being seen as one of the upper echelon QBs in the league, and then flaming out as hard as he did. Boy, it's fascinating, and I think it's worth going back over through the lens of how does that make you as a backup. So, real quick before I get into that, and then we'll do questions and hot takes afterwards from the mailbag. We're doing an early mailbag because I've got a 53-man roster projection coming out tomorrow. But there is some other news. The Vikings have begun their process of camp cutdowns. For full transparency with my 53-man roster projection, because this is the one I try to get as right as possible, I've already done it. I have it done. I will tell you what it is tomorrow, but I have it done. So if I end up being wrong about something, I will be honest about that. I guess I'm a podcaster. How much do you trust me? But I'll tell you, here's who I had, and I was wrong about it. But other Vikings that have been waived are Travis Bell, Robert Lewis, Silas Bolden. Not a huge surprise in any of these, but Silas Bolden was one that was in a lot of people's pre-camp 53-man rosters and stuff. I think I might have even had him in one at some point. Nope, never did. Ben Solak rule. But I mean, he had a terrible preseason, so it kind of makes sense. These early ones are definitely still practice squad candidates, depending on, I mean, a lot of that is you're kind of coasting on like draft profile and athleticism and stuff and saying, well, maybe with a year you can get better at all the stuff that got you cut. Zach Bailey, who just joined the team real quick for that last game. He was a tackle. Logan Brown, another exciting undrafted free agent that did not pan out, but I do see him on the practice squad for exactly that reason. He was pretty highly regarded. I think it was the best undrafted rookie on the consensus board of this class for the Vikings. Mish Powell, Trey Stewart, Keenan Garber, and Reddy Stewart. Reddy Stewart was maybe the only one that I thought maybe had snuck an outside chance to make the team. It's because Matt Freese floated that idea, and it kind of made sense to me that he played pretty well in a game where both Dwight McGlothern and Zemiah Vaughn did not. And like, oh, maybe there's some movement happened, but I guess not. And then also Cam Gill was released, which is a different thing because he's a vested veteran, so it's a different word. It works different. Same with Brett Rippon. So the QB room now is J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, and Max Brosmer. In case anybody is not a Vikings fan or is totally unplugged from J.J. McCarthy, I've been getting these questions a lot. Maybe you guys do too if you're like super diehard Vikings fans, of people asking, hey, what does this Carson Wentz news mean about J.J. McCarthy? So it maybe will sound abundantly obvious to all of you, but just in case, let me put it on record that there is no expectation that Carson Wentz would ever compete with J.J. McCarthy. There's no understanding of there's going to be a short leash because we're going to think about putting this guy in. There is no idea whatsoever of Carson Wentz being any kind of potential starter. Not that I know of right now. As for Carson Wentz's like career trajectory, it's weird, right? Like his first 2 years looked like he was going to be the next big thing. Maybe you could sense, oh, it was fraudulent or, Doug Peterson merchant or whatever. But like all of those coaches that he was supposed to be a quote unquote merchant of are like Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, and John DeFilippo. Like these guys did not end up bearing out. And Wentz really, like the way it worked early in his career, I'm talking, 2017, that MVP season, it was a lot of run around, improvised scramble, right? And then after he gets hurt, right? He gets hurt in 2017, tears his ACL. When he comes back, he doesn't have the same ability that he had before. And he has to play a different game, but he doesn't play that different game. He just starts heaving up YOLO balls and throwing a bunch of interceptions. And it leads to this like torpedoing of his career. It's not crazy to imagine that a guy was just a flash in the pan, right? And then maybe they got a little more tape on him. Defenses did, and he got easier to play against, and therefore he didn't work out. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention all of the stories that came out over his time in Philadelphia, and then after that, Indianapolis and Washington, about how he was as a teammate and his behavior during those times. There's a great video, it's about 25 minutes long, from a YouTube channel called She Got Sports. I'm going to link it in the show notes, that I think does a great job of telling this story. But basically the whole time that Carson Wentz is going back and forth between struggling and, having some bad games, but then also having some really, truly brilliant moments, in particular in the 2019 season when the Eagles win the division again and end up going to the playoffs. But among that whole time, players mostly, and Eagles people, I guess, people within the organ and journalists that cover the Eagles are reporting via anonymous quotes from these players. These players are like giving quotes, but just anonymously, that are like, this guy's egotistical. Nobody likes playing with him. He doesn't take coaching. He doesn't take criticism. He plays favorites. He thinks he's God's gift to the team. He thinks he's the king of everything. And nobody likes to play with him. you have to remember the like context of Nick Foles in this situation, right? When Nick Foles comes in 2017, wins the Super Bowl, and then in 2018, Carson Wentz gets hurt again before the playoffs. He gets a back injury and he's out for the season. And then when Nick Foles comes into the 2018 playoffs, they win the double doink. So here's Nick Foles winning playoff games again and getting all the glory. You know, if you're an Eagles player, you're going, man, yeah, this guy is the one that led us through the Super Bowl, that is leading us through the playoffs again. He's the one with a statue outside. You know, he's the one that got the Super Bowl MVP. He's the one with the jersey in the Hall of Fame. He's the one that did the Philly call. He's the one that goes down in the lore and legend of the Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz was just also there. And 20 years from now, 40 years from now, Eagles fans will remember Nick Foles' name. They will not remember Carson Wentz's nearly as much. And I gotta think that weighs on you. I'm purely speculating here. I don't know where Carson Wentz's head was at during all of this, but you gotta think that that's upsetting. And I believe there were some reports that like he didn't take very well to some of the criticisms that came to him. But Philadelphia at no point benched Carson Wentz for Nick Foles. They did bench him for Jalen Hurts. And so you think about like this moment in time in 2020, right? We don't know about what Jalen Hurts will be yet. He is a second round QB. He's seen as kind of raw, maybe good, maybe not. Bama might have kind of carried him a little bit. You know, he is not a blue chip player. I think if you could redo the 2020 draft, he'd go a lot higher. But at the time, you're thinking that maybe Philadelphia just got a backup or maybe they're trying to push him. But they just won the division with Carson Wentz and he looked pretty good in 2019. So it was kind of unfathomable that they were just going to like move on from him next year. But that's exactly what happened. Carson Wentz struggled in 2020. He gets benched. Jalen Hurts finishes that year. Everyone gets fired. That's their 4-11 season. And everyone is like moves on, right? And Nick Sirianni joins the Eagles. They trade Carson Wentz off to the Indianapolis Colts, where the same thing happens. He struggles up and down. He plays some good games, some not so good games. They end the season on a sour note. They lose to the Urban Meyer Jacksonville Jaguars in the last game of the season. That was a win-in for them. And Carson Wentz ends up getting unceremoniously traded again. And then a bunch of stories come out from the Colts about how the guy's hard to work with and that he's selfish and that he's got a big ego and that he doesn't take to coaching. And the nature in which he struggles is the same. He throws interceptions. He makes stupid plays. He has all the ability in the world, but he doesn't learn how to be a responsible quarterback. He thinks he can still hero ball everything. Hero ball is the word that gets thrown around here. So in Washington, a lot of the same stuff happens. He gets hurt. Taylor Heineke plays. And then again, you've got a team kind of rallying around his backup. And when he goes back in for the last couple games of, win or go home regular season play, he falls apart and they lose and they don't make the playoffs. It's all the same thing. He rubs his teammates the wrong way. He rubs his coaches the wrong way. And he can't stop making dumb turnovers. Now, the dumb turnover thing, that's what the Vikings have had as their backup quarterback for a while, right? You almost want a high variance backup. Yeah, you've got a lot of ability and it's high risk, but we'll take a risky guy versus, a Sean Mannion that can't push the ball at all, and your offense will be properly executed and punt 3 and out every time, versus somebody that is like Nick Mullins that might move the ball way downfield, make a really cool play, score a bunch of touchdowns, also throw 4 interceptions, and you might have to overcome that to win, but there's a path you can see, there's explosiveness, there's something. So that kind of makes sense, but it's this like Kevin O'Connell has always valued good teammate more than I think other coaches. I don't think like Mike Zimmer valued that much. You could be a dick in Mike Zimmer's team. As long as you weren't like a dick like to him. You could be a jerk, but if you can score touchdowns, like whatever, right? If Hitler ran a 4-4, if Hannibal ran a 4-4, Hannibal Lecter ran a 4-4, we'd say he had an eating disorder, right? You can do that. But Kevin O'Connell has been, I think, very meticulous in the kinds of people that he decides to get into bed with or not. I think that has mattered in the draft. I think that they've been more reticent to pick certain players that they don't believe fit their culture. And Mr. doesn't take coaching and all his teammates hate him does not fit this culture. So I wonder, how much things have changed in the last couple of years, because Carson Wentz has been out of the limelight for 2 years. Carson Wentz's career died. Like, you can be a guy that nobody likes to play with, but if you're good, everyone will put up with it. And the problem was that Carson Wentz was also bad, kind of for those same reasons. When coaches would tell him stop playing hero ball, he wouldn't listen. He would say, "You don't know how I play football. I'm going to play it my way." And he would stubbornly make the same mistakes over and over and over again. But you get traded unceremoniously twice, you get cut from teams, and then you can't get a job in 2023 until the Rams call you to be a backup. I wonder if that's a little humbling.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast.
So the Bucs began their cutdown process on Sunday, and as of this moment during the recording, they have cut or waived wide receiver Rakim Jarrett, edge rusher Jose Ramirez, safety Shilo Sanders, offensive lineman Raekwon O'Neal, defensive lineman Mike Green, defensive lineman Devin J. Thomas, defensive lineman Eric Banks, running back Owen Wright, wide receiver Jacob Harris, safety Will Brooks, running back Jace McClellan, and cornerback Trey Avery. Now, there was a false report early Sunday saying that defensive lineman Desmond Watson had been waived, and that turned out not to be true. However, Greg Auman said on Saturday that he could see Watson being placed on the reserve NFI list so that he can continue working with trainers and losing that weight and then be activated at any point during the season. We'll see if that comes to fruition. As for the others, there's no real surprises there. We've talked for weeks about how Rakim Jarrett was not helping his case, and he didn't do anything against the Bills to change that. Shilo, on the other hand, didn't just need a big game, but he needed to really step up everything from what we had seen from him so far. Instead, he takes a swing at Bills tight end Zach Davidson right in front of an official, got himself ejected from the game, and now, to be fair, Davidson was absolutely the aggressor and the instigator in that sequence. He was blocking well after the whistle, got his hands up in Shiloh's face, but that kind of stuff is going to happen, and you have to be able to keep your composure. As a result, Shilo was one of the first players that the Bucs released on Sunday. Usually the first wave of cuts are the easier decisions, so that tells me the Bucs were not interested in keeping Shilo around, and while I thought he had a chance at the practice squad, there's other players at safety that perform better, and not all of them are going to make the team. But what about the players that will make the team? I'm going to kick this one off on offense and who I think is going to make the 53-man roster. Now, at quarterback, Baker and Trask, I think Trask outperformed Teddy, although Teddy didn't have as much time to work with the team. And I do think that he winds up on the practice squad and gets an active roster promotion at some point during the season. At running back, I have Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Sean Tucker, and undrafted rookie Josh Williams. Williams was a late addition, to my prediction, but it makes sense to have him on the team, especially with the spark that he can give them in the return game. I know the Bucs were high on him as a priority free agent. I don't think they risk losing him, to a cut and then trying to squeeze him onto the practice squad. He will get plucked by somebody. Williams averaged 36 yards per return Saturday night against Buffalo, so I think he and Tez Johnson will be the two return men this season, while Williams will have a small role in the offense barring injury. Now, Todd Bowles spoke about Williams to the media Sunday morning saying, quote, It wasn't just special teams. He's a good running back as well. We think he can catch. We think he's a heck of a pass protector. We know he can run the ball, as he showed us on special teams, but he also made some tackles. So, a lot of that goes into the evaluation. He can do multiple things, end quote. At wide receiver, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Ibuka, Tez Johnson, Sterling Shepard, and Ryan Miller. Miller, to me, was the best of the bubble receivers all through camp and preseason. He had the most reliable hands. He made the tough catches that you need your guys to make. Not afraid of contact over the middle, not afraid of getting into traffic to make plays. He was really solid with contested catches, and that's what separated him from guys like Jarrett and Cam Johnson, who didn't do himself any favors with the multiple drops against the Bills, including catches that he should have made that would have resulted in a first down and another one for a touchdown. Tight end was simple. Cade Otton, Payne Durham, Ko Kieft, Devin Culp. Boom. Moving on. Offensive line, you have your 5 starters. Tristan Wirfs, Ben Bredesen, Graham Barton, Cody Malk, and Luke Gedeke. Beyond that, I have Charlie Heck, who we know will start for Wirfs until he returns, as well as Elijah Klein, who did a great job in the preseason playing across the interior of the offensive line. They have him cross-trained at center now. Then you have Ben Chukwuma, who gives them outside depth at both tackle spots. And then I have them keeping Sua Opeta. They believed in him last year to be in a competition for the starting job with Ben Bredesen, and then they bring him back coming off of ACL surgery. I don't think they do that if he doesn't bring them value, or they don't believe in his ability to step on the field and play well when called upon. So in total, that's 25 players on the offense. Now, we're going to switch over to Evan Klosky's predictions, and unfortunately, he couldn't join me for this show, or he would be able to go through it. But he did send me his entire roster, and so we're going to go through it, and it looks really, really similar. Baker and Trask, Bucky, Rashad, Tucker, and Williams at running back. Wide receivers, Evans, Godwin, Ibuka, Tez, Shep, and Miller. Tight ends are Otton, Durham, Kieft, and Culp. Then on the offensive line, we do have a difference of opinion. He has Wirfs, Bredesen, Barton, Malk, Gedeke. All right, locked and loaded, same starting 5. We already know that. Then Charlie Heck, Elijah Klein, Ben Chukwuma, and then he has Luke Haggard over Opeta. Now, Haggard is another guy that provides interior depth and came in as an undrafted free agent in 2023. He was on the Bucs practice squad in 2023 and 2024, but he also has experience at tackle. So he's the kind of player that the Bucs like that can be used across the entire offensive line. So I think this is a situation where, maybe Evan believes that they keep Haggard because he would use one of the few spots on the practice squad that are reserved for players that don't have any restrictions. Most of the practice squad is going to be rookies and second-year guys. Beyond that, I believe you can only have 6 spots that can be used by guys that are essentially unrestricted free agents. So Haggard would fall into that category if he was on the practice squad. Instead, Evan obviously likes the versatility. He's more versatile than Opeta, and he provides, a deeper guy across the entire offensive line. So there isn't much difference between Evan and I, because I think we were in agreement that there were only a couple of spots up for grabs to begin with. So a lot of these roster predictions that you're going to see here and on different Buccaneers websites from different Buccaneers media members, they're going to look pretty much the same across the board with little differences here and there.
August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe the Green Bay Packers are going to win the Super Bowl, or maybe you have some division winner dark horses you'd like to parlay. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
2 recent trades for defensive tackles mean one thing for this Jets preseason finale.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
The Jets have made some moves to shake up their roster this week, particularly on the defensive line. They made 2 trades to bring in defensive tackles. In comes Harrison Phillips from Minnesota. The Jets acquired him on Wednesday. The Jets also acquired Juwan Briggs on Wednesday from the Cleveland Browns, a move which remakes their defensive tackle room within just a couple of hours. And that really shakes up the battle for the roster on the defensive line. But there were also reports that the Jets are, quote unquote, monitoring the trade market for wide receivers. Now, on yesterday's show, I questioned what monitoring the trade market means, but I think that we can surmise that the Jets are going to look for upgrades at the wide receiver position. And there are clear, tangible impacts on these pieces of news for the guys on the roster right now. At the defensive tackle spot, there are now 2 less roster spots available than there were 48 hours ago. There are now 2 guys who are going to be cut who were on the verge of making the team 48 hours ago. So this is a dangerous time for defensive tackles on this team right now. And outside of Quinn and Williams and the guys they just traded for, I guess, because you're not going to trade for Harrison Phillips and then cut him. And I don't think you're going to trade for Juwan Briggs and then cut him. Phillips, of the 2, is the one with the more decorated career. Harrison Phillips has been in the NFL for a long time. He's been a starter in this league. I think they just brought him in to be the starter next to Quinn and Williams. Briggs has a far lesser track record. He was a 7th round pick a year ago. He played just over 100 snaps for Cleveland. And clearly he was on the verge of being cut by Cleveland if they were willing to trade him at this time of year for a late round pick swap. But the fact the Jets traded for him, the fact the Jets did not wait for the waiver wire suggests that he's going to be on the team, which means that Derek Nandi, and there's been a lot of buzz about Derek Nandi not making this team lately. When the Jets signed him this offseason from Kansas City, the thought was that he was going to be a big part of the defensive tackle rotation. But all the buzz has been that he's been playing himself off the team. Now, Byron Cowart apparently has been banged up lately. Another guy the Jets signed this offseason, another veteran defensive tackle. But I think it sounds like he might be heading to IR. But Jay Tufele, guy who played well that first preseason game against the Green Bay Packers. He doesn't have the track record in the league that he's going to be guaranteed a roster spot. And I regret to say it because I like him and I hope he makes the team. And I hope he ends up playing a big role in the defensive line rotation. I don't think Leonard Taylor is safe right now. The undrafted rookie out of Miami a year ago, the guy who was one of the stars of the exhibition season in 2024, a guy who earned his roster spot in 2024 based on his preseason play. I think Taylor will make the team, but I can't be guaranteed of that right now. And that means that this final exhibition game has extra importance for players at the defensive tackle spot because now it's tight. When we talk about how many roster spots there are available for defensive tackles, there are going to be guys that we assumed were making this team who are now going to be cut. One last chance to make an impression. I'm really pulling for Leonard Taylor tonight because I like Leonard Taylor and I want him to be part of this team going forward. But no guarantees there, and no guarantees at the wide receiver position. Outside of Garrett Wilson, we know they're not going to cut Garrett Wilson, but there are lots of question marks at the wide receiver position. And the fact the Jets are floating a rumor, if nothing else, the Jets were floating a rumor that they're interested in trading for wide receivers, which tells you they're not thrilled with what they have in the room right now. And why would they be thrilled with what they have in the room right now outside of Garrett Wilson? At this point, Josh Reynolds is probably your number 2 receiver. And I'm not sure Josh Reynolds has ever been the second best receiver on any team he's ever played on in the NFL. Alan Lazard is Alan Lazard. Some buzz the Jets are still going to try and figure out a way to move on from him. Some buzz the Jets will try and trade him. Who's going to trade for Lazard? I know people are going to say Pittsburgh because Aaron Rodgers is there. The Steelers just seem like too smart of an organization to do something silly like trade for Lazard. Tyler Johnson's a depth player. Arian Smith's a rookie. Malachi Corley's on the bubble. Xavier Gibson's on the bubble. These are guys who've been, either recent early round pick in Malachi Corley's case, or a guy who's been a part of the receiver room the last couple of years, a guy who's been in the mix in Xavier Gibson. These are guys who could be cut. And then you also have some guys lower on the depth chart, Brandon Smith and Jamal Pritchett. Pritchett was a UDFA signing. Smith is a guy who's been in the league a couple of years, but having a strong preseason and playing pretty well on special teams. If you've been following the special teams, Brandon Smith's actually been playing pretty well. A lot up in the air tonight And with the fact that Jets, may be looking to add another receiver shows that there are guys who are going to have to make a big impact. And, I think Corley is at the top of the list. And this could be the last time we talk about Malachi Corley as a member of the New York Jets on this podcast, because I think things are looking pretty bleak for him, but things are not looking great for Xavier Gipson either. Xavier Gibson's been, again, a big part of the receiver room the last couple of years, with the new coaching staff coming in, with Gibson not really showing a lot of growth as a developing wide receiver. He could be a bit on the bubble. But I think roster wide, these trades should send a message, and it's not a huge message. I don't want to make it sound like these trades show that Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji are, the greatest GM head coach combo in the league now. But one thing I do like about this is these trades show that, if nothing else, the Jets are not going to stand pat if they're not happy with players at a certain position. So it's one thing to trade for one guy at a position at the end of training camp. It's another to make two trades, to bring in two guys to try and upgrade a position group at the end of training camp. And we've seen this so many times with past Jets regimes, with regimes all across the NFL. Lots of teams aren't thrilled with what they've got, but they won't make moves. They won't look to upgrade. And I think that this series of moves, the last couple of days when the Jets had two defensive tackles, if nothing else, it should put everybody on the roster at notice that if you're not producing, if we don't have somebody good at your position group, we're not afraid to go outside and make a move to improve to improve the position group. So I think that this maybe adds to the stakes of this preseason game. And if we're going to be honest, this is the backup bowl. Usually the Jets and Eagles play, not every year, but most years the Jets and Eagles play the final preseason game. The starters seldom play. If they do play, they maybe get a series or two at most. There's not a lot of drama in this final preseason game. What the Jets have done with these two trades is not necessarily made this game super dramatic, but it's clearly added to the stakes. It's clearly put a lot on the line, because I think that even if you're not a defensive tackle right now, you see the Jets making moves. You see the Jets bringing in outside guys. It's a spot where they were not happy. You know that if you don't produce, the next guy who comes in could be your replacement. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about the offensive skill spots, because going beyond wide receiver, there are some roster battles that still are probably not settled at this point. And tonight is a last chance to submit a closing case for a couple of young guys who are not yet established in this league.